now that everything's becoming like hyper-federalized, what do we get? Republicans have to win at the federal level. Democrats have to win at the federal level. And we get to the point where both sides continually increase the rhetoric against the other. As they become more and more different and more opposed to each other's worldview, then hatred, fear, then eventually violence. So which brings me to this next story. Business Insider says, according to Business Insider, Tucker Carlson mocks Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for thinking she might die during the Capitol riot in which 5 people died. You see how they do that headline? Look, I can't speak to what Ocasio-Cortez is feeling or fearing. But we also have this story out from NBC where they said some Democrats think their colleagues want to kill them or will kill them or whatever. AOC said she narrowly escaped with her life or narrowly avoided death. She said that she wasn't sure if she should go into the secure chamber because her colleagues may reveal her location to the far right and white supremacists. And she literally calls members of Congress far right, white supremacist sympathizers. And that is insane. They're not. They're just Republicans. But that kind of rhetoric of the other being an evil villain, where they view them not as just a conservative, but as literally a white supremacist, and then saying she thinks she will die, is some of the most extreme rhetoric I've ever heard in my life.
Why are they throwing around all the racial supremacy stuff?
Because it's a tribal signal.
It's literally the coded language that the left has said the right uses nonstop. Mm-hmm. Except and some folks on the right use coded language, but they're very clearly using not even close to subtle language here. They're flatly calling someone a white supremacist. And I take, as a Jew, if you tell me someone is a Nazi, I'm going to have a slightly different response than the average person. And so when you call someone a white supremacist, I would argue, especially because it's being done in bad faith, you are trying to incite violence. It's not merely trying to demonize the other side for political gain, which is clearly their intent. I just don't think they're thinking it all the way through.
There's the right, many on the right will call the left communists or, far left or whatever, or socialists. And then I see a lot of comments from actual leftists where they're like, conservatives call Joe Biden far left, and that's absurd. And I'm like, that absolutely is absurd. Joe Biden is establishment corporatist crony. He's not far left. But there's a big difference between saying Ocasio-Cortez is a socialist, because she is, and her saying they're white supremacists. One of those is maybe hyperbolic. One of those is extreme bad faith, meant to manipulate and lie. So I was thinking about this. I keep hearing about the double standard. I've reported on the double standard. The media will say the peaceful protests. The media will stand in front of a burning building and say, I know about the fire, but it's mostly peaceful, right? And then you get one event with Trump supporters. I'm not talking about the Capitol, and they'll say violent extremists and terrorists, and they'll amp it up to tenfold. And I was thinking about this. There's no point in acting like we should be shocked by this. It was Aris Racino, I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong. I always say that. He wrote for Unheard that conservatives should stop whining about this. There's no debate anymore. The left does not care. You've got two sides that want their rioters to be protected and want the other rioters to be arrested, right? But I do think it's fair to point out conservatives are on the losing end of this because for too long they didn't realize the game the left was playing. Democrats and leftists say this exact same thing of Republicans, but Republicans keep taking Democrats at their word every step of the way. Democrats don't. They'll come out and say these riots are the voice. It's the language of the unheard, and that you have to understand their anger. And then if any Trump supporters come out and just stand on the steps of the Capitol building in Michigan, they scream terrorist. You're a terrorist. When you have far leftists marching, you actually get conservatives defending their right to free speech, saying, well, they have the right to speak. And then when they smash windows and burn buildings down, conservatives complain. And the left says nothing. So I was wondering to myself, at what point will conservatives start to realize the left isn't playing by any rules? It's just manipulation of those who are unwilling to learn or have no idea what's going on. And I think actually conservatives realized this a while ago when voting for Donald Trump, which brings me back to.
And you're saying voters, not politicians.
Yeah, like the voters realized what was going on and said, "Give me Trump." And so there was a comment we got a super chat a while ago where they said that when you have two factions and one is willing to use force to take what they want and the other isn't, well, then you'll have a conflict. But when both sides, when the other side decides they're going to start fighting back, then you have a war. Well, that's where we are now, right? It's not, I'm not saying hot war in the sense of like literal, like people marching on a battlefront. I mean, you have Democrats who have been by any means necessary trying to take power. They literally say those words, and Republicans kept acting like there was a fair game here. So the example is universal condemnation. Conservatives and Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals over the Capitol riots. Black Lives Matter, only conservatives. There's clearly someone not here playing the game. And so as long as conservatives keep assuming that there's an actual game to be played, they'll keep losing.
I think there's a calculation from Republicans that will be by allowing it to go on, the voters will get sick of it and connect the dots on their own. Or by pointing it out, they'll connect the dots and get sick of it and vote these people out. And I think the instincts there are correct. I think what was not calculated was the Trump effect, because Trump is very disruptive to the traditional way we have our leaders, how they act. He was, by being so open on Twitter, for example, and I say this about him all the time, where he is the most transparent president we've ever had because he just tweets his thoughts. But that makes him very vulnerable. That makes it very easy to go after him. It makes it very easy to say he is too disruptive. And then you've got someone like a Joe Biden. Because remember, when you had all the Democrats coming out, there were a whole bunch of people who were very, very, very far to the left, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the one who came out, because I think people instinctively understood that they didn't want to go very, very, very far, because they did that once with Trump from a personality perspective, and it didn't turn out so well in their view. They wanted to calm things down. And so I do think, and we'll find this out in 2 years, was it Trump that got in the way of a Republican strategy to sort of sit back, point out all of the biases, point out the double standards, point out how crazy they are, and just let them hurt themselves?
I think he did, because he would get on Twitter and be like, the far leftists are something, galvanizing this group of people and turning them into this faction. And he was the president, and he would say that there was a far left movement, and there wasn't. But then he helped create one by saying
there's definitely a far left movement. I think he got in the way.
It wasn't organized until he started talking about them
that's
and
absolutely
giving
not
them
true.
something to all hate.
Bro, you just didn't see it. It's been going on for a long, long time.
Well,
I was on the ground at Occupy
it's
Wall Street.
Occupy,
I watched what these people were doing, and it was even before Occupy Wall Street.
I was at Occupy. I wasn't a far left extremist.
Well,
Then
what
you
was
weren't paying
Occupy?
attention to the facilitators.
It was down with the Federal Reserve, fixing the banking system.
No, absolutely not, bro. The facilitators who took over were intersectional cultists.
I saw that, dude.
They owned.
I was told I couldn't speak
because
I was white.
Exactly. They took it over. I watched this all happen. That was years before Trump. That was 5 years. Trump is not the cause of. Trump didn't turn people into this. He's a symptom of what's happening.
He just galvanized it.
I don't think so. I think he's a manifestation of the anger people were experiencing, and that's why he's an imperfect avatar. He was just the guy who was there that people put their anger into. The system was broken. Their jobs were stripped away. Free trade took these things from them, and they saw the game wasn't being played fairly.
Yes, for the people who voted for him. And the one thing that we all have to remember is he did not win the popular vote, which I do think puts a little bit of a wrinkle in that argument, because he won based on the Electoral College vote, and narrowly. And it was a smart strategy the way that he did it, and he definitely connected with those voters who felt exactly that way. But when we go from a popular vote perspective, we can't simply ignore that part for that explanation. And that's why I still think you throw him out. It was an anomaly election. It was. He is an anomaly candidate, which is why he didn't win a second time. I don't necessarily blame the pandemic. Obviously, it did not help. I do think that when you have 4 years of media that goes after the guy on everything that he does, it does wear on people. And I do
74 million votes, the most of any sitting president. I think the contributing factor was the media was screaming. You turned on any news outlet, except for Fox News, I guess, and just imagine Brian Stelter going, the whole time. And so finally people are like, make it stop, make it stop. And then you got regular people who didn't care, were forced into the political world because of the COVID lockdowns. They couldn't go out, they couldn't socialize. I know some people who have no business being in politics. They only tweet about it now. And I'm like, dude, You're a mechanic. You've never talked about this before in your life. And all of a sudden, you're like the Democrat cheerleader. When the lockdowns happened, their normal communication was disrupted. The normal things they cared about, the video games, the movies, the sports. So they go on social media where it's all politics all the time. And then you force people into this room where everyone's just screaming, and then they beg it to stop and they vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree with people wanted a reset to calm things down.
I think Trump would have won if there was no COVID. If that didn't happen, obviously Trump would have won because we had Moody's Analytics, numerous polls, forecasters predicting a Trump victory off of standard metrics. When COVID hit, a few of them still predicted a Trump victory, but many of them backed away because the economy was in the gutter. And as they say, it's the economy stupid. But I think the biggest factor was, and it's partly, I shouldn't say partly, in many ways, Trump's fault. Trump really went after the media. He made it very personal for them.
Yeah.
And he played to their egos and weaponized that. And that turned them against him to an extreme degree.
Yeah. He did that to people, just common people, too.
Well, because Trump was like, the media, it's lying, it's fake news, and he was constantly digging into them and going after them, they decided to make the fight personal. And so Jon Stewart brought it up. He said Trump played, these journalists are very egotistical. So when Trump says something, they take it personally and go after him.
I've honestly never seen a president be so antagonistic since Nixon. Nixon hated the hippies and the Black Panther movement so bad, and they did impeach Nixon.
You could argue that Obama was antagonistic to the right. He criticized, he was saying a lot of similar things about Fox News.
It was in a different way.
Right.
But yeah, you're right.
He wasn't overtly like on
Right.
Twitter being like, those far right.
There was no Twitter.
Oh, yeah, there was Twitter with,
at the time when
2010,
Obama came in, Twitter was not prominent at all.
But he wasn't
In fact,
using his influence to talk about the far right.
This
ever.
is the first president to use Twitter throughout an entire term. And even though I think it's probably the wrong way to use it, we don't really know if it was the wrong way or not because he's the first person to do it.
No, I think there's. I've talked to a lot of people throughout the past several years, and most of the regular people I've spoken to would say, the ones that supported him, I voted for him, but I just wish he wouldn't tweet.
Yeah.
And then he would, and people would roll their eyes, and that was it. He gave so much fuel to the media to complain about. I mean, there were journalists whose job was to wait for their phone to buzz with a Trump tweet. People built careers being reply guys to Trump.
Yep.
And that kept the cycle going. If Trump just didn't tweet for 1 month and said nothing, the news cycle would be forced down. Their Twitter reply guys would be out of business, but Trump couldn't let it go.
There's like a phenomenon where you become addicted to pain. I don't know if you guys have ever felt like you have like a sore shoulder, and then all of a sudden one day you change your posture, your shoulder's not sore anymore, and you miss tweaking it. So you go ahead and you tweak it again, and the soreness comes back, and you're like, oh, there's that familiar. Have you guys ever done that?
No.
I'm alone in the room here.
Strange, yeah.
So like,
Yeah, I don't know.
it has a lot to do with posture. Like there's an addiction to feeling something, whether it's good or bad. And I think people felt like that with Trump's tweets.
Trump would say something because the media would lie. And then he found his way to speak to the people directly. So then he would tweet out, that's not true, that's fake news. Then the people who don't actually care about Trump, these reply bots and reply guys, build a career off it. What happens is then they end up getting 700,000 followers, building a community that's only shared interest is Orange Man bad, which creates the narrative and keeps it fuels the hatred for Trump. Trump should have done two things. Left Twitter and went to Parler or Minds or any of these other platforms, maybe PocketNet, and then shut up for a little bit.
He should have made a YouTube channel.
He had one.
He had one.
Well,
Yeah.
he should have made daily video vlogs.
Yep. That would be amazing.
I think he shouldn't have said anything. He over-communicated.
Yes, he did.
That was his biggest issue. If you've got someone who is delivering, and this is COVID aside, you're killing it on the in the economy. You're absolutely killing it. From a conservative perspective, you are delivering on judges. You've got foreign policy decisions that generally are accepted by folks on the right. People needed a reason to vote against that.
Yep.
And he would give it too often. Not always his fault, but he didn't. He made it too easy.
I'm starting to think that a lot of politicians, a lot of people in the media are understanding that the more extreme you could make a situation, the more extreme language you could use, the more emotional ammunition you have. But they keep forgetting that this leads to also extreme actions, and they don't really understand the full kind of ramifications behind it. And they're caught in this loop trying to get all the attention, trying to get all the clicks. And I would say, you know, Donald Trump, especially with some of his more bombastic style, was also a part of that as much as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, I know people like to label these people as kind of populists, but also their strongest asset that people believe that makes people believe that they're populist, I believe, is also their Achilles heel, which should be understood in context here as well.
Did you guys see that picture of Kathy Griffin holding Trump's head beheaded?
Yeah,
all
I'm
bloody?
not familiar.
Yeah.
No.
It just started
What
being
is that?
recycled. Kathy Griffin, this comedian, but I'll tell you, just so if you don't know, look it up. Kathy Griffin, Trump's head, did a photo shoot where she was like, in the middle of the shoot, she was like, let's just do this, and held up Trump's bloody head as if that's not incitation to violence, like
No,
spinning things towards what they've become.
It's
and she didn't get
unhinged.
banned off Twitter.
She got fired from CNN.
Well, she didn't get banned off Twitter.
And she had a mental breakdown and was like, my life is over. And she was crying and begging for her job back.
Yeah.
She went nuts. And then she doubled down later because her life's already destroyed.
But
think about the level of psychosis on the left you have to get to before they actually do anything. She's still on Twitter after posting that, like you were saying. On the right, you can say, learn to code. Gone.
Yeah.
Like, that was really I mean,
Insane.
it was a free artistic expression, I suppose, to hold the president's head up all
It
bloody
is.
and beheaded.
It is.
If you want to do it with Biden, would that be okay now?
Well, I think someone already tried it with Biden and was taken down.
Yeah.
Did they?
Right?
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I remember hearing something
I
about
was
that.
surprised.
It is free expression, and it's also odious.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think it contributed to to this Capitol riot.
I think what we need now is the next person that needs to leave office is probably Ocasio-Cortez, because I think she might be one of the most high-profile and bombastic politicians we have. I think she's very, very much like Trump. I mean, you look at the things she says that we were just talking about, where she's like, I narrowly escaped death. My colleagues are white supremacists who might kill me. It's like, dude, you're making it all worse. Calm down. Lauren Boebert is not a white supremacist. She's not going to hurt you. She's just a 5-foot-tall woman who wants to have a gun. People have guns. Lots of them. Calm down.
Yeah, but I mean, she is acting the way that you would expect someone that age to act on social media. That it's all about.
Isn't Lauren
the
Boebert
you.
the same age?
Is she?
I think she's a little bit older, actually.
Yeah, she's got 3 boys.
But
I think.
still, like, they're both, I think, AOC's in her early 30s. Lauren's in her mid-30s.
She is a millennial, and that's generally how not all millennials. That is generally how millennials act on social media. So
Sure,
this
but
idea that she's somehow, against type, arguably she's going.
No, I don't care how she acts. The issue is we need everybody to chill out
Yes.
and start talking, and she is setting things on fire. And don't get me wrong, Trump did too. I think she's very much like Trump. Okay, now Trump's been banned from everything, and they're all cheering for it. Okay, great. If we're going to be banning people, then she's got to get banned too, because she says inflammatory stuff. Now, the left defends her, and they'll be like, that's not true. Of course, and the right defends Trump. I don't care. Listen, you don't get to act like you are absolutely perfect. They can come out and say Trump's got to go because he's inflammatory, and simply by saying, remember this day, he's inciting violence. Okay? Well, then when AOC comes out and says Republicans are white supremacists who are going to kill me, what do you think's going to happen if she keeps saying that? When she keeps saying that? What about when she referred to the immigration centers as concentration camps and doubled down? I'm not going to say she should be banned for that. Okay? What I'm saying is she's allowed to her opinions, and I think she's crazy. But when you have people who are claiming Trump is the problem and she's doing basically the exact same thing, are you going to call her out next? No, they're not. They're going to defend her.
Yeah, and a lot of this is the responsibility of the media. Because the truth of the matter is, those of us who are on Twitter, we are still few and far between who pay that close attention to most of this. Tucker Carlson, most watched cable news show in history, is not reaching hundreds of millions of people, right? Mm-hmm. And so the average person, I don't think, is getting this information. They are aware of who she is because she's really good at building her brand. They probably have an opinion of her, but I bet you if you asked them some specific questions, probably couldn't answer them about her. And the same, I mean, we know about Donald Trump. You go to a college campus, we've all seen the stupid videos. You ask a bunch of questions and no one knows what they're doing. So I think that that's the average person. And so that's really on the media to sort of step up and start reporting this more. And it can't just be Fox News. It can't just be one-offs here and there. They have to actually commit to it, and they're just not going to.
Tucker was the biggest show in cable until he came out against Sidney Powell or just questioned the evidence, and then his ratings got cut in half, and now Fox News is dead last. Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. What happened was when Fox News challenged Sidney Powell, Tucker Carlson was like, where's the evidence? And everybody fled. They went to OAN and Newsmax. So there's some diversification among conservative news channels. What it really reveals is that while Fox News may have been number one at the time, in terms of conservative content, it was dead last. Just because there was only one channel. One channel means all the conservatives go there. So you got ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, all these networks and their left perspective. There's substantially more viewers on the left perspective than the right. It's been that way for a long time, except I think in talk radio. I don't think left has an equivalent of anything in talk radio.
They tried and they failed many times.
That's weird. Why is that?
I think because you can get the content anywhere else.
What do you mean?
The left-leaning and flat-out left content you get
everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right.
And so that they did not get involved in the radio side early enough, they weren't able to really defeat what conservative talk radio has built. Now, there are some exceptions to that around the country.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.